Hey guys, welcome back. We are starting the Renaissance now in chapter 17. Not the Renaissance program here at LP High School, but the actual Renaissance from right after the Middle Ages. So remember how the Middle Ages kind of wraps up. We had the Hundred Years' War, and so we have nationalism and we have more concentration on countries, but we also just recovered from the plague. And so remember that people are going to not really trust the church as much as they used to because they went in to pray to stop the plague and it didn't work. And so people are less likely to be going to church now. And so they're starting to celebrate kind of the end of the plague, and they're moving forward now into more of an age where maybe they start looking at themselves a little bit more than looking just at God and the afterlife. And so the Renaissance is interpreted, if you're going to translate it from the language, it's going to really mean rebirth. And so this is going to take place between 1300 and 1600. And starting in Italy, really our first time coming back to Italy since we studied Rome way back at the midpoint of last semester. But here we are in Italy. And so we have some city-states that were really starting to take off because of the Crusades. And afterwards, remember we talked about the routes that the Crusades took become trade routes for between the Middle East and Central and Northern Europe. And so these city-states in northern parts of Italy especially really start to take off and really start to grow. And so after the plague, there's a shortage of workers simply because a lot of the workers had gone out onto the back out into the countryside, and so they're not in the cities anymore. They went out there to try and avoid getting the plague. But more so as we had, remember, 1/3 of the population in Europe is gone, and so there all of a sudden there's a whole lot of jobs opening up. And so the shortage of workers caused a demand for some higher wages, and with these higher wages, the merchants weren't able to hire as many people because now they had to pay more for the people that they did have. And so merchants often looked to other ways to pay their bills, and this is going to be kind of the spur forward a movement of art and learning and things like that. But some merchants were doing quite well, and they earned very high incomes, and therefore they thought that they deserved a place of power in their government over those who inherited their status. Remember, a merchant isn't going to pass his status on down to his family members. It's not like a noble. It's a little bit different. Where a noble, if you're born into a noble family, you're going to be a noble and pass it on down. A merchant is going to earn their place in society, and if it's a high place, it's because they did a lot to get there. It was individual achievement that got them there, and so they thought, hey, I earned this spot, and so I deserve to be there more than some of these other people. And so the ones that we really want to look at here is the Medici family. They are a ruler of a powerful bank in Italy, and they had branches throughout Italy. Cosimo de' Medici was the wealthiest European of the time, and in 1434 he won control of Florence's government. He didn't seek political office for himself, but he was able to influence members of the ruling council to give them loans. So he would say, hey, I'll give you this loan if you do this for me. So he becomes kind of this power person behind the scenes rather than out in front of the scenes. And he passes away in the 1460s, and his grandson Lorenzo is going to come to power in the late 60s. And he becomes known as Lorenzo the Magnificent, and he ruled as a dictator while he still claimed to have a republic in the city of Florence. Not so much a republic. Remember, republic, we're going to have a representative democracy is basically what a republic is going to be. And so this is kind of the stature that's going on here. We have very rich and we have some very poor. And so what happens is we start looking, remember these merchants are starting to get into learning and getting into the arts, and so they start looking to Greece and Rome as their influences. They started to look down kind of at the art and the literature and the learning that was going on in the Middle Ages, which was much more aimed at the at the peasant level, and they decide to kind of go back to the way it was to be more of the rich. They drew a lot of their inspiration from the ruins around them. Remember, Rome, the Roman Empire, is all around them. They started to study some Latin scrolls that were preserved in some of the monasteries. Hadn't been out of the monasteries in years and years and years. They're able to start to looking at those, and then when the Turks conquered Constantinople, all of a sudden we're able to get hold of all these manuscripts that are within Constantinople, and these Christian rulers are able to bring them out of Constantinople and into Rome, and we're able to check these things out. So we've got all this new stuff going on. What's going to happen is all of this classical learning is going to lead to some more worldly values. We're going to start thinking about life here on Earth a lot more than life after life here on Earth. So this is going to be called humanism. Humanism is the intellectual movement that focuses on human potential and achievements instead of before with the Gothic architecture, everything is aimed at seeing God. And so humanists influenced art. They influenced architects. They tried to bring back the good old days when everything wasn't just about God, really. They also brought back some classical learning, so learning about things like history and literature and philosophy. These become known as the humanities because this is what the humanists are studying. And so today, if you are a freshman, sophomore, where you're deciding on your high school major, you may have picked an area where you concentrate on English and social science, and this is called the humanities, and this is where that term comes from. So worldly pleasures. The decision was made that wealth could be enjoyed here on earth without offending God. Remember we talked about John Wycliffe and and Huss, and talked about how they thought that the clergy should not have any wealth, and that the wealth was just kind of looked at as against God. And now we're saying, you know what, you can be rich and still be a good Christian or a good whatever. And so the Renaissance society becomes much more secular, and they live for the here and now, kind of the party time atmosphere, rather than living for strictly the afterlife. This isn't supposed to be a torturous life, that we can have fun here and still please God. And so we wind up with the arts really coming about here. And the church is one of the biggest financiers of the arts. They are some of the patrons of the arts during the Renaissance. The Renaissance comes a term called the Renaissance man. There's also a Renaissance woman, but that's a lesser known term. But we still use the term Renaissance man today for somebody who does a lot of things and can do many different things. And so this is where it comes from. The Renaissance man is the idea that men should try to master as many fields of study as they can, and they are well-rounded. They're a universal person. This is a Renaissance man. So taking straight from our book, it says a young man should be charming and witty and knowledgeable of the classics. So this would be literature and history. In addition, he should dance, sing, play music, write poetry, be a skilled rider, so riding horses, wrestler, and a swordsman. So all these different things, rather than specializing, you are good at everything. A Renaissance woman, on the other hand, is upper class woman, and she should be familiar with the classics, and she should be charming. They should inspire art rather than create art. So people should want to paint a picture of them or sculpt a sculpture of them. They had little to no say in politics, but they were a lot better educated than the women of the Middle Ages. So while they're making small steps, at least they are making steps forward, the women in the Renaissance. The art that we're going to look at here in the Middle Ages tends to be very realistic looking, rather than more sketches. We're really looking at the human body and the human emotions and trying to capture them in these pictures. And this follows the trend of human importance, that paintings and sculptures of human beings become very lifelike. We get the the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle group here coming about with Michelangelo and Donatello. They're among the most famous painters at the time. But then we get Leonardo da Vinci is really the big one we want to talk about here. He was a true Renaissance man. He studied medicine, other sciences, and he used these thoughts and findings in his painting. So he knew what a muscle looked like and how it reacted, and he could get those tones in his pictures, which made them look so lifelike. And the two that are most important to know, and you probably already know them, are the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. And so check those out when you get a chance. But art wasn't confined to painting and sculpting. It was also comes about in literature. And so we have Dante, who writes in the vernacular rather than in Latin. When we say that somebody writes in the vernacular, basically it means that they're writing in their native tongue. They're going to write in Italian rather than write in Latin, which is more of a proper, more reserved for the church writings, things like that. We have Petrarch, who is the father of the Renaissance humanism. He wrote a lot of sonnets in Italian, and he also wrote letters in Latin. We have Boccaccio, who was best known for his work Decameron, which is a series of realistic stories. A little bit off color, some of them, but they're little short stories, and his stories, people were drawn to them because they were real life. They used real people with flaws and traits and things, and so they weren't far out there, hard to wrap your head around. This was just like your neighbor or your friend, and so they had real life struggles that going on. And our last guy that we need to know here is Machiavelli. Machiavelli wrote The Prince, and so if you ever take a political science class when you get to college, you would definitely talk about Machiavelli, because he said that the ends justify the means when it comes to politics. So basically what he's saying is it's okay to lie, cheat, and steal, to do whatever is necessary to become powerful, as long as when you are powerful, you're going to do very good things and help a lot of people. So if you kind of screw over a few people on the low end here in order to get in power to help thousands and thousands and thousands of people, the end, so the helping all these people, justifies the means, the how you got there, what you did to the people on the bottom. And so that's a very controversial philosophy. And so Machiavelli, definitely need to know who he is. That's going to wrap up section 1 for chapter 17, the Renaissance. We're getting started in. Next time we'll talk about how the Renaissance is spreading, and then we'll definitely dive into some Martin Luther, which will lead us to our big project over the Renaissance. Have a great night, everybody, and we will see you tomorrow in class.